I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard Knock Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard Knock Life, comics, movies, and TV, yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective.
Welcome to Hard Knock Life. I am Keith Chow.
I'm Britney Monet.
Brittany, what's going on?
Not much. It's been, good last few days. I will say what's the thing that I'm excited about for my nerd poppin', but yeah,
Oh,
good.
suspense. Keep them guessing.
Yeah.
Well, you know who hasn't been having a good week is Marvel Studios. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
The first thing I wanted to talk about is, I don't know if you saw the news, Victoria Alonso, who was one of the founding members of the studio. She was a executive producer and vice president in charge of VFX and everything.
Yeah.
She got shit canned this week. And the first press release was just kind of oh, she left the company, and it was just kind of a ho-hum, news item. And then it turned out she was fired, and it turned out Disney didn't like the fact that she was promoting a movie she produced for the Oscars. And then I was well, maybe because she's also in charge of VFX, and all the VFX people were having all these issues with the movies, and Ant-Man didn't succeed. It was just I don't know. What did you think of the whole Victoria Alonso story this week?
Well, I think it's kind of, I don't know, stupid to fire someone for working for another studio company, because how many of their actors and writers and directors have worked for other companies and have not been fired and promoting the other work. So to me, that makes no sense, honestly.
It was a small independent foreign film from Argentina. And so she promoted the movie that was their, entry for the best international feature. And so she did press for it. But also there's statements coming out of Alonso's camp saying that she was unfairly fired, and she actually had the studio's blessing to promote, this passion project. And it's not a good look that they fire the lone female Latina executive because she was, again, promoting a passion project. It wasn't even she was promoting a competing film.
Yeah.
So it's messy is all I got to say about it.
Yeah, it's so messy. It just looks weird, especially if James Gunn is still sort of kind of working for them when he was promoting his DC stuff, or I don't know.
That's a good point.
It's just it's a weird I mean, technically he is leaving Marvel Studios with Guardians 3, but still it's just I don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah.
And I've heard also reports though that she is not necessarily some of the best people to work with.
Right. I mean, well, now everyone's got their knives out, right? Both sides are putting out press releases and leaks and talking to people and stuff.
I mean, I will say, if it would make Marvel's relationship with VFX studios improve, then that's good.
Yeah, because that was another rumbling, right? Is that because of all of the turmoil in the VFX houses, she had her attention distracted with this Argentina 1985 movie, and that's why which I think is a little simplistic, but I'm sure there's more to it, because the other side of the whole thing is that ever since Bob Iger came back to Disney, they've been cutting shit left and right, just trying to recoup some of the money that the previous boss lost over the last couple of years. So yeah, it's not a good time to be a Marvel. And you mentioned that maybe it's too early to talk about the other big news this week is that Jonathan Majors was arrested, I think, in New York.
Yes.
So you're pinning your whole phase 5 and 6 on that dude, and it's too early to know. Maybe he's a shitty person. Maybe these domestic violence charges are bullshit. Either way, it's just not a good look at Marvel Studios right
and
now.
I'm someone who always believes the victim first before, just because I feel there's so many times that, victims who they get often denied having their abuser actually, doing time for it and paying the consequences for what they've done. So I feel it's really hard to I'm not going to discredit anyone.
Absolutely.
But, it is. Yeah, it's not looking good for Marvel with him being, like you said, the person that they have built their, their next phases on. I mean, I hope it isn't true, honestly, of course, because he's genuinely a talented actor. Yeah. So that's the frustrating part. But I will still give the victim the benefit of the doubt. And, victims recant their statements all the time.
Well, and then the superficial part of this whole thing is that the good thing about Kang being a multiversal villain is that it doesn't got to be Jonathan Majors playing him. Like,
yeah,
if they got to recast Kang, they're not like locked into that dude because it's a multiversal thing. Like if Peter Parker can look like Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland and Tobey Maguire, Kang can look like different dudes.
yes, that is true. So yeah, but I don't know. It's just such a it's like a too soon. I don't know. I don't want
Sure.
to.
I mean, and that news just dropped. It's like as we're recording this, it just came out. So who
Yeah.
knows like the ramifications of it? But it was just like, I mean, he was having a year too, right? Because he was in Ant-Man, he was in Creed. It was just like, oh, this is
Mhm.
Jonathan Majors' breakout year, and then this kind of came down. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
to your point, it wasn't just like he was arrested for like disorderly conduct. It was like domestic violence, and that's never a good sign.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's not looking good. But
I mean, this is all in prelude to Guardians coming out, right? That's the next Marvel property.
mhm.
And like you said, James Gunn has got one foot out the door too. So it's like, it's just, I mean, if there's one good thing on the horizon for Marvel is, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything good on the horizon because like Ant-Man was a truly disappointment box office wise, critical fan reception. Like, Guardians is kind of like a last hurrah. Like just the future of Marvel Studios just feels a little shaky. I don't know. How do you think?
Yeah, it unfortunately it does. I mean, I feel like Guardians will be fine, but
But it's the last one. James Gunn's gone
Yeah.
after it, Can't
Yeah.
rest any hopes on it.
I do feel like their problem is that they are cutting story over to favor, the spectacle, and I think they need to go back to focusing on the story more than serving spectacle because they were really like, top dudes.
Yeah, no
Now-
competition for a long time.
I mean, but also, Shazam did terrible.
Yeah.
Zachary Levi keeps putting his foot in his mouth. I don't know. I don't want to say it's superhero fatigue because
It feels like it. I mean, I'm glad you brought up Shazam because, talking about box office flops, I mean, Shazam really truly was a box office flop. As much as we liked it, we talked about it last week, but
yeah,
made less money than Morbius. They already announced it's coming out on digital April 17th, which is like literally a month after it came out in theaters. So it's not even going to like recoup any money theatrically.
no.
And as you said, Zachary Levi is kind of feuding with, I mean, everyone wanted Shazam versus Black Adam, but we wanted it in the movies and not on social media.
Exactly. Yeah, and then I don't know. Then he's saying, "Oh, well, people like take bits of what I say and edit it and tweak it to how they
Dude,
want."
you put out
to."
like a 20-minute Instagram live where you were talking about like, So for those of you who weren't paying attention because no one paid attention to Shazam, I think it was a Hollywood Reporter or the Rap Story came out last week that everyone knew about this. Dwayne Johnson put the kibosh on any Shazam cameo in Black Adam, and similarly, he squashed any Justice Society cameo in Shazam. So originally, the mid-credit sequence in Black Adam was supposed to be basically the scene we got in Shazam, except instead of Economos and Harcourt recruiting Shazam, it would have been, I believe, Hawkman and Cyclone. It was basically that same scene, except it would be them instead of the two Suicide Squad people. And Dwayne Johnson was like, no, I don't want anything to do with the Shazam movie, which is, like, I mean, as much as I like The Rock, it's like, come on, dude, like, you're a Shazam villain. It's like, anyway. And so when that story came out, basically, Zach Levi on Instagram just basically posted a screenshot of the story and said, the truth shall set you free or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so frustrating because I did really enjoy Zachary Levi as an actor, and he just is, I don't know, making me just be like, all right, dude, whatever.
Oh yeah, we haven't even mentioned his like potential anti-vax stance. He tweeted something about like Pfizer or pharmaceutical companies or something.
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know, like I was gonna say, if it's genuine like superhero fatigue that is happening, or it's just genuinely the stuff that is coming out right now is just not good, so it's not doing well, like, not good to, I would say, everybody, because even though I like Shazam, I understand it's not going to hit for everybody.
Right.
So I don't know if it is genuine superhero fatigue. Things aren't being marketed properly enough for people to come see some of this stuff, or like, it's just, again, people want good story over spectacle.
I mean, what's on the horizon? We got Guardians in May,
And then
Flash in June. That's it,
yeah,
right?
and then the Marvels in November.
Right. But as far as like the spring and summer, it's those two holding it down for the next like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Blue Beetle, I think, is coming out in October.
Okay.
So, but again, like, is there hype around Blue Beetle? Like, we haven't seen any trailers or footage or anything really.
I hope there will be, and I feel like, because especially since the actor is playing Blue Beetle is from Cobra Kai and that show is really popular, I do feel like if it's marketed right, you can if you get the Cobra Kai audience and DC people behind it, and like DC fans of the comics, I feel like it'll do fine. But it's just a matter of how well they market it again, because a lot of people know Shazam was coming out.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder too, is it superhero fatigue or is it just like nerd shit fatigue? Because we're going to dive into it more after the break, but there were rumblings that the Mandalorian's ratings are not as high as they've been for this season.
Well, I think the problem with the Mandalorian now is that it's leaning heavy into like more of the Star Wars lore, where if you were just a casual Star Wars viewer, you're not gonna it's gonna be a little bit maybe harder to follow, especially if you didn't watch Book of Boba Fett and you didn't watch
yeah, and that's the thing, if you didn't watch Book of Boba Fett and the last thing you saw on the Mandalorian was Luke Skywalker kidnapping Grogu and then you tune in for season 3 and all of a sudden Grogu and Din are back together again, you're like, what? How did that happen? Right? Because that whole sequence took place in another show.
Yeah, so I feel like, if you're not watching the other shows, all of the shows, not just like Book of Boba Fett, because I feel like we even talked about how a lot of episode, was it 3, felt a lot like, kind of would work really well with what's kind of going on with Andor.
Right.
So even though it's 2 different time periods, I'm very aware of that. But I'm just saying, like, that whole like style of that form of storytelling within the Star Wars universe. So yeah, it does very much feel like if you don't know Clone Wars and you don't know Book of Boba Fett, and maybe.
Well, yeah, and I think you're right. Like, there's so much mythology in the show now, because like when people tuned in for the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, it was very much like unlike anything they'd ever seen before. And it just like it was The Mandalorian. You're following this one guy and this cute little baby Yoda going on adventures around the galaxy, and it was kind of like refreshing. But now for this season, it's like there's a little S on the back of the Mandalorian. It's like about the Mandalorians. And if you don't give a shit about like Mandalorian culture and mythology, you're probably lost as fuck watching this season. There's a whole like sequence of people without seeing their face and they're just speaking in monotone, and like it works when it's like one guy, but now it's like 20 people like that, and you're just kind of like, I mean, again, I enjoyed the episode, and like I said, we'll talk about it more after the break, but just in this theme of fatigue of nerd shit, it just, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting tired of it too. I don't know what it was.
I feel like for me, at least with Star Wars, I'm not over it. Like, if anyone saw my Twitter post, I literally bought like 4 Star Wars books yesterday. So obviously, like, I'm not like fatigued on it, but I follow everything, so there's a difference, or even if I'm not necessarily like playing the video games or reading every comic, I see enough on my timeline where like I kind of have a vague idea of what's going on in those sectors of it.
And don't get me wrong, like I said, I mean, I had a good time watching the episode, but I can see why like a casual fan or a normie would like tune in and just be like, what the hell is happening? There are dinosaurs eating little baby Mandalorians, but not really eating them.
Yeah.
Like, what is happening? And like, how do Mandalorians have kids? Like, do they like they can't take their helmet off to even eat, but like, do they fuck with their helmets on? Is that how, like, is that some kinky like Mandalorian shit? Like, what's going on there?
Or someone said it could be like for Islam, or Muslims, maybe it's like the only person who ever sees you without your hijab is your, partner.
But you can't even show your face to your kid, because that's what Din, he showed his face to Grogu, and that's why like the armor was like, you're excommunicated, you know? It's like,
Well, because I don't know if it counts because he wasn't even actually Mandalorian. I don't
who,
know.
Grogu?
So I don't know how it works with like, I don't know, showing it. I don't know if you can show your face to your kid, but I don't know if it's
But like
more.
Grogu was like the way, again, I mean, we're debating Mandalorian mythology with which they're like making up as they're going along. Let's be real. Like the idea of like foundlings are Mandalorian as long as they're adopted into your culture, right? Like, so like
Yes.
they already had the insignia by the time he showed his face to Grogu. So it was like either a clan of two. So why can't you show your face to your kid? And that's what I mean. Like, I think for these folks, they can't even show their face to their family, which again,
Yeah.
I
Well,
think makes
also this is just like a certain sector of like.
right. It's not all Mandalorians because
Yeah.
you mentioned Clone Wars. If you watch Clone Wars, Bo-Katan's sister's side, like they didn't even wear armor; they were pacifists, you know. But well, let's dive deeper into this episode after the break. We'll take a break, come back, and we're going to talk all about this particular episode of The Mandalorian, which had a really awesome cameo, which we'll talk about on the other side. So, Brittany,
Yes.
you're a big fan of Paramount Plus, aren't you?
Oh, I am indeed. That is the home of one of my favorite shows, which I know some people I've talked about it.
Yeah, you're not the demographic.
I know I'm not the demographic, but the show I'm talking about is obviously Yellowstone. If you don't know, I love Yellowstone, and it's literally one of the most like. I'm saying I know a lot of people like, oh, it seems like it's for like rednecks or something like that. I promise you, the drama is so good. It's just, and if you're a fan of Twilight, there's like an actor from Twilight that's on there.
Well, it's one of the biggest shows in the world.
Yes.
And it's got these like great spinoffs, right? Because isn't 1923 a spinoff of Yellowstone and 1883? Am I getting those years correct?
No, it's 1923. I'm not there yet on the spinoffs.
But it's got like Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. Like,
yes.
That's crazy that those are like actors you get for TV shows.
Tim McGraw and Faith Hill are on the 18 one, if you are a country fan. Which Tim McGraw is honestly a really great actor. Don't know if you've ever seen Friday Night Lights, but he's a great actor. So they're great. Those are great things to check out. I have to wait for my mom and brother to watch it because we are such a fan of the show. Teen Wolf is also on Paramount Plus, and they released a new movie with Tyler Hoechlin is in it and back. So I'm excited to watch that finally when I get around to it. I know it's been like 2 months now, but it's hard to coordinate our schedules.
Well, the reason we're bringing up Paramount Plus is that if you click on the link in the description to this podcast, you can actually stream Paramount Plus for 1 month for free. We're just excited that we get to share Paramount Plus with all of our listeners. So click on the link that you see in the description and stream Paramount Plus for free for a month. Try it. If you don't like it, you can cancel. But if you love it, if you love Yellowstone, Teen Wolf, Star Trek, all of the Star Treks are on Paramount Plus. Do that and you'll help us out in the process. My favorite aspect of this episode was the flashback to the prequel, flashback to Order 66. But before we dive into the details of that, right before the break, we were kind of talking about like why folks may be feeling a little off on The Mandalorian this season. And I have to admit, like some of the storytelling structure this year has been kind of weird. And it reminds me of like what my issue with Boba Fett was, where it was like completely disconnected storytelling. Like the flashbacks don't feel that connected to the overall story. Like this time it felt a little bit like you could see like Grogu's remembering, and that transition worked. But last week we talked about a little bit like the Pershing stuff and the Mandalorian stuff was completely like disconnected, and it was just kind of like a jarring transition. At least they did the transition better this week because you knew, okay, Grogu was feeling some trauma watching the armorer, and that was some damn good animatronic puppet acting this week. I guess
it really was. Yeah, I don't know. I'm okay with the way they're sort of doing it because I don't know. To me, this was a little bit more interconnected than Boba Fett, because then Boba Fett got to a point where it was just like, oh.
Here's Mandalorian's 2.5.
Yeah, but right now for the Mandalorian, at least it feels a little bit more connected. I'm hoping so. It just feels like, at least for right now, for me.
Well, I have to admit too, like I feel like this week the flashback I was more interested in than the actual story because I was not feeling the save the kid from the dinosaur story. I gotta admit, I was like, let's get back to the Order 66. That seemed more interesting to watch than climbing a mountain.
Yeah, I also think the problem is they're trying to balance like people who are tired of always it being focused on the Jedis, and
Yeah,
then
that's true.
I think they're trying to balance like the people who want the Jedi and prequel and era stuff, but I love how much the Mandalorian though kind of uses a lot of things and brings back stuff from the prequel era, because I think
That's
it's
the
great.
Dave Filoni influence, right?
Oh,
Dave
yeah.
Filoni's whole project, his entire life, has been putting respect on the prequel's name,
Yes, exactly. But I do appreciate it because everyone knows I love the prequels pretty much. So I was really excited for this cameo because first when they like couldn't really see the person, my little brother thought it was Mace Windu, and I was like, no, no, no.
Well, that was a like a running fan theory that Mace Windu was the one who saved Grogu. But speaking of putting respect on the prequel's name, so the big cameo this episode, one, we learn who actually saved Grogu from Order 66, because there have been some flashbacks in previous seasons where you kind of see from Grogu's perspective, and there are Jedi being killed in the temple, but someone somehow got him out. And it turns out it was a Jedi named Kelleran Beck. Apparently, and I learned this after watching the episode, Kelleran Beck has been in the fringes of Star Wars mythology because he was the game show host of like some kids Disney Channel show.
Yes.
Jedi Temple Archives or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that Jedi, Kelleran Beck, is played by
Ahmed Best.
Ahmed Best.
Yeah, it was really funny because like I was saying, my little brother kind of thought, is it Mace? I was like, no, no, no. I had said, I was like, because I didn't remember the name of the character he played.
Right.
I was like, it might be Ahmed Best. And then they like actually like, do like the focused close up where you can see who it is. And I was like, yeah, that's Ahmed Best. I was like, he's a Jedi on a kid's like game show.
Oh, so you knew about the game
I just
show?
haven't watched it. Yeah. So that's why I told my little brother. I was like, yeah, he's like pretty sure. I was like, it would be funny if he's playing like that Jedi, but it is Ahmed Best.
Yeah.
So
and he's playing the same Jedi.
Yeah. So now I'm like, maybe I should watch that show. But I heard a lot of people like that show. So yeah, I love that he is, getting the most respect that he deserves, because so many people like to blame him for Jar Jar when it's like, he's an actor cast in a role. He's just doing his job.
Yeah. And not only that, I mean, not only the ridicule, but like he suffered like mental health anguish.
Oh, yeah.
Over like the fan backlash to his character.
Yeah, but like I think some people don't realize how intense the Star Wars fandom is.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it can be a lot. There's a lot of people coming at you. They did that to Jake Lloyd.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I'm wondering if maybe we'll get a Jake Lloyd cameo in The Mandalorian in the season 4
I don't know
or 5.
if he would even ever want to.
Yeah, I doubt it too. One thing, and we said this earlier in the pod, that Dave Filoni, ever since he started doing Clone Wars and eventually Rebels and now on The Mandalorian and Bad Batch, like his whole thing, like the reason your generation, right, kind of grew up not only on the prequels, but the prequels plus the Filoni verse, gave you guys like a different perspective on the prequels, where like old fogies like myself, who just, like I've come around, right? I'm not as bitter as I was back in the 90s, but that's because, I'm older too, and I have a little bit more perspective and maturity when I think about fandom. But like, yes, Star Wars fans are super toxic, and there's a whole like vitriol for the prequels, and then we saw that for the sequels, right? Like there's a whole slew of vitriol for folks who love the prequels and the originals and just hate the sequels, and 20 years from now they're going to be people who love the sequels and all that stuff. So like any fandom can be super toxic and super bad. And what's kind of great about like what Favreau and Filoni are doing is they're kind of, in a sense, they're kind of bridging both the prequels and the sequels, if you think about it. Because last week, was all about the rise of the First Order. This week was about redeeming, Ahmed Best, and it's kind of cool that like they're acting as a bridge, and so like hopefully we can bring peace to the Star Wars fandom.
I hope so. But yeah, I really thought in general Carl Weathers did a great job directing this episode.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I do hope they do more stuff with Grogu's past.
You think he's gonna get a little helmet? I really thought she was making him a helmet.
I think he's getting there, but yeah, I think he's also maybe going to, maybe he's gonna think about if being a part of another type of because in a way, being a Jedi is like being in a cult too.
Well, that's actually a good point. I think that's another thing that I was a little kind of like, I wouldn't say turned off. I feel like turned off is too strong a sentiment. Like, but I do feel like, I mentioned earlier, like you have a bunch of faceless, monotone speaking cultists, basically, like you said, who have all these like warrior codes and all this stuff. And it's very Jedi. It's very like, like what was cool about the first couple of seasons of The Mandalorian is, like I said, it was like a Western. It was like a, guy out in the range, just bounty hunting and shit. And like, I think they forgot the fact that Din's a bounty hunter now, and he's just like straight up, just like a religious cult. And I mentioned this last week with R5D4. Like, I do feel like they make the universe too small when this kind of like random character that we're getting to know, now he's like a chosen one because he's got the dark saber and he's friends with Luke Skywalker, and it's just almost like, I at least wish they spent a little bit more time of like Din just kind of traveling the galaxy, but now he's leading the Mandalorians, and who knows what conflict's going to happen between him and Bo-Katan now that she's like,
oh yeah, she's gonna end up being she is gonna at least, they're for sure gonna butt heads, but I kind of hope that she just gets what she wants without like hurting Din or Grogu. I do hope that she gets her throne on Mandalore and all that, because that's all she's wanted.
I still want a flashback to Satine, and then they have Nicole Kidman playing Satine.
Yes,
that has to be. And hell, get Ewan, get Ewan back. I want to see a scene between Obi-Wan and Satine, played by Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman. Hell, just deep fake a scene from Moulin Rouge, and that's cool. Like, do the Elephant Love medley, but have it be a Satine Ewan. Well, before we go, I did want to ask one more thing about the Grogu playing paintball. How cool was that?
Oh yeah, that was cool. I was like, oh no, he's gonna. At first, I was so worried. I was like, oh,
he looked so sad. Like, Dad, I don't want to.
I was like, oh, this poor baby. Why is your dad doing this to you? Yeah. And then obviously, he won, but
sure. And then the other kid got eaten by a dinosaur for all his.
Yeah.
And so that's the lesson. If you lose to a little baby, you're gonna eat by a dinosaur. Anyway, what's nerd popping, Brittany? You got me in suspense from the beginning of the podcast. I need to know what's nerd popping.
I don't know how much of suspense it should be, but my favorite band of all time, Fall Out Boy, released a new album called So Much for Stardust. I ordered, the box set that comes with the signed CD and the hoodie that says So Much for Stardust on it. The album is great. It actually might be their best album yet. It's so good. Oh gosh, I was just listening to it today, and there's a song on there called I Am My Own Muse that feels so cinematic, and I could totally see it being a Batman like movie song. So Matt Reeves, if you're somehow listening to this, if you didn't see my tweet already, that needs to be the next song for Batman 2, because that song is just, it's so like, I could just see it really in a Batman movie. It's great. The album is so good. There is, I think, a monologue they took of Ethan Hawke too from something as one of like the interludes. Yeah, it's a great album. It's good. And then also I bought a whole bunch of Star Wars books. I bought The Princess and the Scoundrel, which is about, Leia and Han. I bought Aftermath, which is the aftermath of basically like the falling out of the Republic. I bought Convergence, which is one of the new Republic books. And what's the other one I bought? And then I bought The Queen's Shadow, which is a Padme book, which I'm very excited for all of that. That is my nerd popping for this week. Did
you catch Fall Out Boy on Jimmy Fallon last week?
No, but I've seen the music video, so I know that they dressed up from like their characters from the music video for it. Yeah, those are my dudes. I am seeing them in July, so
that's awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. What's nerd popping for you?
I'm going to Japan.
Yes.
So for the next 2 weeks, we're taking a break from doing these live recaps of The Mandalorian or whatever. So there's going to be 2 special episodes of Hard Knock Life the next 2 weeks. And then we'll come back in mid-April and pick back up with talking about Mandalorian. Maybe we'll finally catch up on The Last of Us and we'll talk about that. We'll make it an all Pedro Pascal as daddy podcast. But yeah, so I'm going to be touring the Land of the Rising Sun for the next couple weeks, and that's what I'm looking forward to. But anyway, that's Hard Knock Life. Like I said, we'll have some special episodes. Sean Taylor's coming back. We're going to be talking about De La Soul, and I'll be interviewing Curtis Chin, whose new memoir, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, comes out in the fall. So you'll hear conversations with those two cats in the next couple of weeks. And then again, we'll be back with regular scheduled programming in mid-April. Until then, Britney Monet, how can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at Hi Britney Monet on Twitter, Instagram, and Bumble, if people still use Bumble. That's also my Tumblr, URL. And then I also obviously do another podcast, which you can follow us at litroom_podcast, which is, the former Black Lightning podcast and Naomi podcast, talking about basically it's almost this podcast, but from an all Black host perspective. That's the way I can describe it. Yeah, we are focusing on, we're going to be recording a new episode soonish, and then hopefully finally get that interview with that person I was teasing. So yeah.
Cool. You can find me on Twitter at the Real Chow, _real_Chow, and on Instagram at Real Keith Chow. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color on all platforms, and go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all of the pods in the network. Give us a rating and a review if you do. Support us on patreon.com/the Nerds of Color. Subscribe to our videos at youtube.com/the Nerds of Color, and go to tpublic.com for merch and search for the Nerds of Color. And until next time, Britney Monet.
So much for Stardust.
This is the way.